And as those food commodity shelves are impacted, that will be a direct indicator, very much like the pulse is a direct indicator of the beat of the heart. This will be an indicator of what's going on in the back-end paper side of things. And then one day, poof, there won't be anything on the shelves, and you'll know the whole system has collapsed.
Great, thanks, Clif. I believe we have a question from Asetia. Asetia, please ask your question. Actually, Asetia might be having problems with her mic. I'll ask it for her. Clif, in The Shape of Things to Come, Issue 9, you describe a trigger for the explosion of the derivatives bubble as a gold price tide-bound form of derivative that fails in an instant due to a crisis in the gold precious metals market. Does the data give any indication as to what events might initiate that crisis? For example, is it more likely that the crisis arises from a failure in COMEX gold delivery, such that the demand for physical gold overwhelms available supply in vaults, and cash is not accepted by account holders for settlement groups? B, disclosure in the mainstream media of India's purchase of several tons of tungsten-filled bars? C, rich riots? D, failure of a gold ETF?
No, the data is actually quite specific. We actually have because the narrowness of that particular subset of the entity, we can drill down to a small set of detail. And it appears that there will be a failure of ability to deliver gold to a select group. The select group thing is a cross tie over to a subset within the powers that be. And it will be this failure of delivery to this select group that will initiate a mini riot among the rich relative to the people that wanted their gold handed to them by some kind of an institution, which I don't think is a bank, given the data, but rather some form of a holding company. And these people will get really pissed, refuse to accept paper, and that's going to start everything off. And it's just kind of curious that it's going to be maybe these 30 or 40. I have no idea how many people involved, or whether they'll physically show up, or whether they'll be notified by mail that, their gold's now been absconded by a bank to settle some debt or some damn thing. But these people are going to be very upset, and they're high enough up that it acts as kind of like the linchpin to this particular set of derivatives, and then poof, everything just goes. At least according to the data, and given how the WikiLeaks thing came out and this rapidity of the spread of the language planetarily, I have a tendency to think that the speed will also be rather shocking, because there's a lot of the shock word, startling, stunned, speechless, and then, subset supporting that is the speed of the communication of all of this. So once it goes, it should be actually blindingly fast.
And can that be fast now, especially after you sent out that message in regards to the aware observers about a Bank of Sicily in person insider? Have you had more information on that?
I have, but nothing that's necessarily meaningful to the situation. It appears as though I don't know what their role is, because I don't really follow anymore anyway. I used to know all of the banks and who they owned and all of this kind of stuff, but I've let all that slip in the last few years, so I can't really say how this is going to relate to that. There's something in the data that has a tendency to make me think that the actual spread, the difference in the planetary distance between the initiatory point and then the failure of the banks. So initially I thought it was like something would occur in New York, in a vault in New York, and that would cause this bank to fail in California. And that being the initial point of the Bank of Sicily relative to the U.S. before becoming BOA. And I thought, well, but now the last time I'd looked at the data, it actually makes me think that perhaps the vault is in London, and there's this like a great circle line that again leads all the way back to California. It'll be moot. It just won't matter where the start is relative to this. That the telephone or the telex or however the information will get there will be so rapid that the bank will hear about the situation at the vault and then literally begin failing within minutes. Now, how long it'll take us to see that failure, I suspect hours, but it might be a day or more.
Okay. Diane, you've got a question for Clif.
Yes, hi Cliff, this is Diane B. We live a wee way away from the large northern hemisphere, so I'm quite interested to know if the data shows any mention of the Australian and New Zealand currencies and how that's going to play out in the broad scheme of things.
They're actually going to decay relative to assets, and the Australian currency is going to decay slower than the dollar, faster than New Zealand and faster than Canadian. I'm not looking for, in our data, I suppose I could drill down and look at the detail, but the stuff that simply jumps out, the last real currency that is, I want to say globally, or at least effectively traded globally, looks to be the resource-based currencies in Canada. There's going to be different schemes that will come about after that. There's going to be a Pan-Asian gold-backed thing that'll be proffered, but how soon that'll occur, I don't know. But the Australian currency will hold up a little bit longer than the dollar, but in this way which the data is spread out, I couldn't say if that's going to be days or weeks.
Oh, thank you very much.
Great. Mulder, I think you have a question for Clif.
Yes. Okay. I was wondering, in some of your previous reports, you talked about seeing deflation prior to hyperinflation. Have we already seen the deflation that you mentioned, or is that still yet to come?
We're living through some aspects of it. For instance, we've seen the deflation at a huge level in the housing market. And it depends on where you live as to whether it's personally touched you. But I've got friends of mine that are resident in Las Vegas, for instance, that have seen deflation hit so hard that it's caused the total collapse of the real estate market there, giant increase in the unemployment, even a downturn in the casinos from the local people that would go and visit for food and other reasons and other than gambling, which led to a further downturn and also layoffs in the casino business itself. So we're seeing deflation all over the place. It depends on what part of the planet you're in. For instance, I've got friends of mine that are in the mining business in a couple of places on the planet and have seen deflation hit locally, and it's been a quasi-good thing for them because their ability to sell their products on a global market has gone up. They've been able to buy equipment, for instance, caterpillars and big diggers and stuff, at cheaper prices than they would have been able to last year, but specifically over the last 2 or 3 years, they've seen a 30 and 40% decrease in the price they're paying. So it's kind of a funny situation because it's going to be hyperinflation in food and energy, and real soon thereafter, as the hyperinflation takes over, you'll see deflation hit all over, to the point where you'll see the same kind of gray markets that existed in Russia as it was collapsing out of the Soviet Union. I don't know if you're aware of what happened then, but, professors sitting on the side of the street trying to sell college books, that kind of thing.
Okay. Had another one for you here. Do you see the hyperinflation as... Are we talking about a currency collapse that could actually happen that's not necessarily the same type of thing you would have seen in the Weimar Republic, or would this really lead to an accelerating type of hyperinflation along those lines?
I don't know if it'll play out like it did in Germany, because it won't be a bounded condition. Bear in mind that what happened in Germany in the 1920s was relative to how they had been treated in World War I, but they had healthy economies around them. France and Switzerland and Italy and so on had relatively healthier currencies, and so their condition was bounded right there. You could always actually step over the border and live in a more sane world without the daily increase in hyperinflation, as you can in Africa, as long as you're not dealing in Zimbabwe bucks. What we're going to be facing is not going to be that, because it won't be bounded by any given currency. I think the hyperinflation will, again, take off relative to food and then energy, and thereafter it'll be up to the local environment as to determine whether the hyperinflation spreads. Right at the moment, for instance, the government for years has been tolerating and even profiting from, and to a certain extent promoting, a much higher rate of inflation in the healthcare system than in the general populace. And Bernanke actually thought to use some of the provisions of the Healthcare Act as a method for sucking off some of the hyperinflation that he's been feeding into the system in these quantitative easings and other mechanisms, which they're only reporting a small fraction of what they're doing. And they're doing everything they can to force the money out of the system in various different places where they think it'll be harmless. The problem is there is no place. This is not a set where you can like push it off onto France, so to speak. It just isn't going to work that way. So the hyperinflation that we're going to see will express itself, I think, first in food and then maybe a general currency collapse following the collapse of the just-in-time delivery system. And that will be the undoing of the system itself, is the reliance on the no warehouse model and everybody living off of fast food and not having any stores and so on. We'll just have to see how smart and how prepared the populace is. I have reason to suspect it won't be even a small fraction of what I'd hoped, because only 2% of the population is in the United States anyway is invested in precious metals.
Okay, so if the dollar actually collapses, do you see replacement currency being issued?
No. You have to understand how currencies work. Currencies are an issue of confidence. If the piece of paper you've got that's tainted red and has a 50 scrawled on it gets 5 other zeros smashed on the back end of it, you won't have any confidence in it, but it may still well be traded the same way Zimbabwe bucks are traded on a daily basis there. Do I suspect that there will be another currency issue that everybody will have faith in because somehow this currency will be debt-free and its grade of paper will be better and its grade of ink will be more pure? No, I don't. Currencies don't work that way. They spent 25 years conditioning the European populace for the introduction of the euro, and even then it didn't go as well as they'd planned. So there's all kinds of issues involved. For instance, people don't consider the gray and the black market. When you issue a new currency, you have to deal with the huge percentage of the populace that in no way wants the government or tax authorities to know what they're doing. So they exist in this gray world where they try and deal in cash, etc. Our government realistically has very little understanding of how extensive that might be. They estimate among themselves in this state alone it's 12%. Some states it's much higher. When you introduce a new currency, you have to take all of that kind of thing into account. So it's not like you can go to a bank on Monday and withdraw a currency out of the ATM that says the Amaro, and you can take it to the Safeway. You're going to have a generalized freak out when that occurs because of all the people that are going to say, well, what about my U.S. dollars that I've got squirreled away in the mattress?
Okay, thanks for that, Clif. I believe we've Asetia, you've got a question for Clif?
In the shape of things to come, number 9, you state that problems will exist at governmental levels for precious metals and owners later in 2011, probably in the fall. This language is cryptic and somewhat unsettling for owners of metals. I was wondering if this suggests a possible attempt at confiscation of precious metals by the powers